Welcome to Slash Forward. Continuing the theme this week, we're going to watch the cautionary sex tale It Follows, released in 2014. Let's get to it. We open on the street in a cozy suburban neighborhood. A young lady in negligee is running some sort of fitness circuit in the street when a helpful neighbor offers assistance.
Are you okay?
I'm just jogging in my heels. She circles back and peels out, driving all night, eventually coming to rest on the beach. She calls her parents to say her final farewells, having resolved herself to her fate. And when morning comes, we see she's been transformed into an abstract statue. We then transition to a floater in a pool. Her name's Jay, and we learn through a conversation with her friends that she has a date that evening. After her glow up, we see her boo has taken her to a movie, where they play a game of guessing who the other person would want to trade places with. Hugh chooses a young man.
I mean, how cool would that be to have your whole life out of you know?
Because your boy's got depth and layers. During Jay's turn, he selects someone she can't see, causing him to desire to leave quickly. He claims an impending bout of electric diarrhea to justify bouncing before the previews. Jay discusses Hugh's odd behavior with her sister Kelly, and seems to resolve to advance their relational physicality in order to draw him closer. So, the next night, under the light of the harvest moon, they make soft, sensual love in the backseat of his Plymouth. Then things take a dark turn when Hugh chloroforms her and Jay wakes up tied to a chair. He tells her a fantastical story about giving her his gift in order to transfer some sort of unknown entity to her that will pursue her. The thing that will be following her now is going to look like a person, and it will try to kill her. If she dies, it'll go back to pursuing Hugh. He's kept her tied up to convince her of this, and sure enough, they soon find themselves being slowly pursued by a nude stranger in the night. He then does her the courtesy of dumping her in the street in front of her house like a true gentleman, and her friends call the police, who do a basic investigation from which we learn that Hugh was a nom de plume, and his address was a fake. Jay tries to settle back into a normal life, but sees a strange woman advancing toward her from the window. After pausing in the hallway to verify this seems to be what Hugh was talking about, she meets up with Kelly and Paul at the ice cream shop to talk about it. Sounds like BS to them, but Paul is so desperate to be promoted out of the friend zone, he offers his protection. So they have a laid-back slumber party that evening. Unable to sleep, she joins him in the living room, where Paul gushes about how lucky he is to be able to hang out with her, but it's interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. He reports back that the coast is clear and goes to check on the others. When Jay double-checks, she finds the entity is there with meth mouth and pissing itself. Retreating from the terrifying scene, she closes herself in her room, but there's a knock at the door, and the knocker identifies herself as Yara. With indication of an all-clear, Kelly goes ahead and opens the door. Jay promptly soils herself, and then cycles her ass out of there. With all this being witnessed by her neighbor Greg, Jay BMXs to the park without even pulling a 180, so it's kind of boring. Her friends eventually arrive, along with Greg, who offers to help. They start by investigating Hugh's old squat house, which Jay knew of, but never went into. Paul, the ever-vigilant horn dog, finds his spank bank, which also happens to be fertile ground for evidence collection, as it yields an old photo in which they can identify a letter jacket from a local high school. Through this, they get his name from an old yearbook and go to confront Jeff at his family home. They have a powwow where the rules are reiterated, and Jeff impresses upon her the importance of not telling his mom he's sexually active, as well as continually passing the curse along in the hope it will move far enough down the line that they'll never have to see it again, like reverse social distancing. The friend group is incredulous, but he recommends they drive far away to give them some time to think it out, as the thing is always shambling slowly toward her from wherever it was. So they head to old Greg's hunting cabin where they settle in and strap up, practicing for when the time comes to accidentally shoot innocent bystanders. An unknown amount of time later, we see the gang live in the beach life, which is naturally conducive to dropping one's guard, because you can't be anxious when you're floating on the lazy water. As Greg walks off, we see a creeper of dubious origins approaching. This gives us a view of what the experience is like for the others, who can see its effects and interact with it physically, but it proves to be too strong for them to handle. As they retreat to the shed and with no consideration for what's down target, Jay opens fire and lands a next shot, clarifying some more of the rules and limitations for us, as it appears to have only a temporary effect. Jay takes the first opportunity to run and immediately ditches her friends, but she doesn't make it too far before stalling out in a cornfield and succumbing to a head injury. She wakes up in the hospital, anxious about how long she's been out and how far away she is from her last location, not knowing if it's had enough time to catch up. Unable to leave, we see Greg take one for the team. Hey, good on you, Greg, you selfless king. He goes about his normal business, but doesn't see anything concerning. Despite the transference, Jay stays locked away, not feeling safe until Greg confirms he hasn't. This leads them to uncertainty about what to believe, since Greg was busy taking a leak when all the physical interactions were happening, and he hasn't had any unusual sightings. That night, Jay finally catches an eyeful of Greg and Long John's breaking into his own house. She tries to rush in and warn him, but he doesn't hear her over the banging of his mom, and the banging of his mom, which results in his death. Later, she and her friends head out to enact a plan, and as they drive off, she sees it's gotten itself stuck on the roof like a silly goose. Those shingles are gonna be hell on your nads when you shimmy down, bro. Jay waits in the center of a pool, trying to lure it in for electrocution, apparently. However, it isn't totally stupid. stupid and begins flinging the objects at her, which luckily come unplugged along their journey. Kelly then has a big brain idea, allowing Paul to land a headshot. Later on, Paul, the thirsty bitch, finally gets a taste of his deepest desire and receives an initiation into the club. Then we see Paul trawling for hookers, but with no idea of his success. Assuming that it's been sufficiently passed along, Paul and Jay try a return to normalcy by going steady, but still, it follows. Maybe. And that was It Follows, a chilling, atmospheric horror film that also doubles as an abstinence-only birth control PSA. If you enjoyed the video, I'd love for you to become a part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.